I had already sent the money. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from my sister, not meant for me. Dad said, just tell him it's urgent again. He won't ask. There was a screenshot attached, a group chat I wasn't part of, dates lined up, amounts listed. The emergency I'd just paid for was planned weeks ago. No panic, no guilt, just calm instructions on how to get money out of me. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to make sense. Then the message vanished. Seconds later, my mother called. Her voice was shaky, the same way it always was when she needed something. She said, "It's really bad this time." And for the first time, instead of reaching for my card, I felt something snap. Because I finally understood the truth. I wasn't the family's safety net. I was the resource they'd learned how to drain. I didn't answer my mother's call right away. I just sat there, phone in my hand, engine off, staring at the space where the message had been, like if I looked long enough it might come back and explain itself. It didn't. I replayed it in my head instead. Dad said, just tell him it's urgent again. He won't ask. Not ask who, not ask why, just won't ask. That line kept looping because it only works if it's been tested before. When I finally answered, my mother didn't even ask where I was. She went straight into it. Her voice had that tight, controlled tremble she used when she wanted something without sounding like she was asking. "Evan," she said, "we didn't want to bother you, but your sister—" I cut her off. "Which emergency is this?" I asked. There was a pause. Too long. Not panic long, thinking long. "She's overwhelmed," my mother said carefully. "Things are piling up. We thought if you could just help one more time—" "One more time," I repeated. She sighed like I was the difficult one. "You know how she is, and you're in a better position. You always have been." That was the phrase. The same one they'd used for years. "You're stronger. You can handle it. She needs it more than you." I glanced back at my bank app. The transfer had already cleared. I told her I'd sent the money. Relief flooded her voice instantly. Not concern, not gratitude. Relief, like a problem had been solved exactly the way she expected it to be. "Thank you," she said. "We'll explain everything later. Later. Always later." After the call ended, I pulled over and opened my messages again, half hoping I'd imagined the screenshot. I hadn't. The timestamp was still burned into my head, the date, the phrasing, the way my sister's message wasn't panicked at all, just instructional. Like this was a routine. I checked our family chat, nothing about an emergency. No build-up, no warning, just silence until they needed me. That's when it hit me. The emergency didn't start the call. The call followed a plan, and I was the last person looped in every single time. I sat there longer than I meant to, realizing something else that made my chest tighten. If this was true, if they were coordinating before they called me, then this wasn't desperation, it was strategy. And I had just paid for it again. Before that screenshot, everything had always sounded reasonable. That's the part that made it work for so long. I wasn't rich, I wasn't reckless. I wasn't some prodigy who lucked into money and didn't notice it disappearing. I had a job that paid well because it required consistency, patience, and a tolerance for pressure most people didn't want long-term. I worked in product operations for a mid-sized tech company in San Francisco, not flashy, not founder level. The kind of role where you're responsible when something breaks and invisible when everything runs smoothly. I'd been there long enough to earn trust, promotions, and a salary that stayed stable year after year. That stability was the key. My income wasn't explosive, but it was predictable. Bonuses, stock refreshers, careful investing. I lived below what I could afford, partly because I wanted options, and partly because I'd learned early that if I ever looked too comfortable, someone would need something. That someone was usually my family. Marissa, my sister, had always been framed as the opposite of me. Where I was steady, she was creative. Where I was practical, she was finding herself. My parents loved to say she just needed time to land on her feet, as if feet were something you misplaced repeatedly into your 30s. She bounced between jobs that sounded impressive but never lasted. Marketing roles tied to vague projects, events that paid in exposure, side hustles that were always about to turn into something bigger. There was always momentum in the story, even when there was none in reality. Whenever she came up short, it was never described as failure. It was framed as bad timing, or stress, or someone else not seeing her potential. And whenever that gap needed filling, my parents knew exactly how to explain it to me. "You're in a better position," my father would say, like it was a compliment. "She's trying," my mother would add, like effort alone paid rent. At first, the money I sent felt temporary. A medical bill here, a security deposit there, a just until her next contract clears situation that somehow reset every few months. I didn't track it. I didn't question it. I told myself this was what families did when one sibling was stable and the other wasn't. The thing I didn't notice was how cleanly the responsibility slid into place. No one ever asked Marissa to adjust her lifestyle. No one ever suggested she downsize. No one ever talked about repayment. The conversations always came to me already shaped, already justified. By the time I heard about the problem, the solution had my name on it. And slowly, so slowly I didn't feel the shift, my role changed. I wasn't helping anymore. I was expected. That expectation lived under everything. In how quickly my parents relaxed once I said yes, in how Marissa talked about money like it was a temporary inconvenience, not something earned, in how emergencies never came with details, just urgency. I told myself it was fine because I could afford it. What I didn't understand yet was that affordability wasn't the reason they chose me. It was the excuse. They didn't see me as the sibling who happened to be doing better. They saw me as the plan that made sure Marissa never had to find out what worse actually felt like. By the next morning, the screenshot wasn't the problem anymore. It was everything around it. I woke up to 3 missed calls from my father. No voicemail, just back-to-back attempts, spaced exactly far enough apart to look casual, like he didn't want to seem desperate. That alone was new. Normally, once the money was sent, things went quiet. Gratitude, relief, space. This time, they were checking in. I returned the call on my way to work. He didn't ask if I'd seen Marissa, didn't ask how I was. He asked, "You're okay with everything, right?" Not, "Are you okay with everything?" I asked him what he meant. There was a pause, the kind where someone decides how much truth they can risk. "You know," he said, "helping out again. Your sister's under a lot of pressure. Again." That word landed differently now. I told him I needed clarity, actual details, where the money went, what the emergency was. His tone changed immediately. Not defensive, annoyed. "Why are you making this transactional?" he asked. "We raised you better than that." That was the first crack. By lunch, my mother texted me a long message I didn't finish reading the first time. It was emotional, vague, full of phrases like "family sticks together and we never ask much from you." I reread it later and noticed what was missing. There was no explanation, no bill, no name, no event, just pressure. That afternoon, Marissa posted a story online. Nothing dramatic, just a casual video from a cafe near her place. New coat, new bag, smiling like someone whose life wasn't on fire. The timestamp matched the emergency window almost exactly. I didn't confront her. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I went back. I pulled up my bank history and filtered transfers to my parents over the last few years. The list kept loading, page after page. Same amounts, same timing, same spacing. Emergencies apparently had a rhythm. I cross-checked the dates against what I remembered. Illnesses, crises, near disasters, most of them blurred together in my head. But the pattern didn't. Whenever Marissa changed apartments, money moved. Whenever her work stalled, money moved. Whenever she went quiet, money moved. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't about one screenshot. This wasn't even about this year. Whatever was happening had been happening for a long time, and everyone knew their role except me. That night, my parents called again. Together, speakerphone. That's when I understood something else. They weren't worried about Marissa. They were worried about me noticing. And the moment that thought landed, I stopped wondering why this felt wrong. I started wondering how far back it really went. I didn't confront anyone. That was the first real decision I made. If I pushed too early, they'd close ranks. I'd get emotion instead of facts. So I did what I should have done years ago. I stopped listening to what they said and started paying attention to what they'd left behind. I began with my own records. Every transfer I'd ever made was there, clean and time-stamped. I exported the data, dropped it into a spreadsheet, and lined it up by date and amount. Patterns jumped out immediately. The numbers weren't random. They escalated in steps, not spikes, like someone testing limits and adjusting once they learned what I could absorb. Then I added context. I pulled old texts from my parents and Marissa and matched them to the transfers. Phrases repeated. Just this once. We won't ask again. She's almost back on her feet. Each promise had an expiration date built into it. When I overlaid Marissa's life events, new apartments, travel, gaps between jobs, the alignment was almost perfect. This wasn't reaction, it was scheduling. The deeper I went, the clearer the structure became. Emergencies weren't surprises. They were announcements. The real decisions had already been made somewhere I wasn't invited. I checked my email next, searching for anything I'd ignored over the years. Buried between work threads and newsletters were forwarded messages from my parents, applications, drafts, things I'd skimmed and forgotten, a lease inquiry with my name casually listed as a family guarantor, a loan pre-approval email I'd never responded to but hadn't explicitly declined either, notes that framed my support as ongoing. I felt my jaw tighten. They weren't just asking for help, they were creating a paper trail that assumed I would always say yes. Then I found something that didn't fit the pattern, an email exchange between my parents from years earlier, accidentally forwarded to me during a device sync. At the time, I'd ignored it. Now I read it slowly. They were discussing Marissa's future, not emotionally, strategically. My father had written, "If we push her too hard, she'll fall apart. Evan won't. He'll adapt." My mother replied, "We need to keep him close. If he moves or starts his own family, this gets harder." I stared at that line for a long time. They hadn't just reacted to my stability, they'd planned around it. More than that, they'd planned around me. I went further back. Old calendars, shared documents, notes saved under neutral titles. I found references to opportunities I barely remembered, job interviews out of state, a relocation conversation I'd dropped without thinking much about why. Each time there was a reason it hadn't worked out, timing, family needs, something urgent that needed me here. At the time, I'd told myself I was being responsible. Now I saw it differently. They hadn't asked me to stay. They'd made leaving too expensive. By the end of the night, I wasn't angry yet. I was focused. Because once you realize someone's been managing your life without your consent, the question stops being why. It becomes how far they're willing to go to keep control. And I was about to find out. I didn't need to confront them to change the balance. All I had to do was stop playing my part. The next emergency came 3 days later. Same pattern, same urgency, different excuse. My mother's message was short this time. "We really need you today." No details, no explanation, just assumption. I didn't reply. An hour passed, then 2. My father called, not angry, careful. He asked if I'd seen the message. I told him I had. He waited for the rest of the sentence that never came. "That's it?" he asked. "For now," I said. Silence stretched between us. He was calculating. I could hear it. That night, I logged into accounts I hadn't touched in years. Not to move money, just to look. The house records, the investment statements, the transfers that had always been framed as temporary help. They weren't temporary. They were dependencies. I requested full documentation. Contribution histories, ownership percentages, audit trails, things my family had never expected me to ask for. Within 24 hours, emails started coming in. My mother wanted to talk things through. My father wanted to clear up misunderstandings. Marissa texted me directly asking if something was wrong. That was new. She'd never needed to ask before. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I did something small but permanent. I removed myself as a guarantor. No announcement, no warning. Just a correction filed quietly where my name had been used as leverage. The effect was immediate. My mother called in a panic, pretending not to be panicked. "There's a delay," she said. "The bank flagged something." I told her I was reviewing my financial exposure and would circle back. She didn't like that word, exposure. By the end of the week, the tone shifted completely. They weren't asking anymore. They were checking my mood. Was I stressed? Was work okay? Did I need space? It was transparent, desperate. Because what they were really asking was whether I was about to break the system they depended on. Marissa tried again. She sent a message pretending to care about me. "You've been quiet. Just want to make sure you're good." I could almost hear the calculation behind it. If I reassured her, she'd relax. If I didn't, she'd escalate. I didn't reassure her. I pulled the last thread quietly. I stopped the automatic flow. No more background support, no more invisible padding. When the next expense came up, it hit them directly, and nothing caught it. That's when the cracks started to show. Not explosions, not fights, confusion. Bills didn't move the way they expected. Accounts didn't balance. Timelines slipped. They didn't accuse me yet. They couldn't afford to. But they felt it. The moment they realized something fundamental had changed, that the safety net wasn't gone, but had a will of its own now. And I knew what came next. People don't panic when money disappears. They panic when control does. I didn't confront them at my apartment. I met them where they always felt in control, their house. I told them I wanted clarity, no accusations, no drama, just answers. That alone should have warned them. My mother made tea. My father sat across from me with his arms folded, already defensive. I didn't start with emotion. I started with evidence. I placed printed timelines on the table, transfers, dates, the pattern laid out cleanly, impossible to argue with. Before you say anything, I said, I already know this wasn't reactive. My father glanced at the papers, then looked away. This isn't what you think, he said. I leaned forward. Then explain why every emergency happened after planning conversations I was never part of. My mother tried first. We were protecting the family, she said. Someone had to be stable. Someone, I said. Or me? Silence. So I moved to the part they couldn't talk around. Why did every opportunity I had to leave fall apart? That finally landed. My father exhaled slowly. Because if you'd moved, he said, things would have collapsed. There it was. No apology, no denial, just logistics. You blocked me, I said. We redirected priorities, he corrected. You were reliable, Marissa wasn't. I pulled out the next document, draft inheritance allocations, earlier versions. My name slowly shrinking, then disappearing. My mother's voice cracked. You don't need it the way she does. You decided that, I said. Without telling me. My father stiffened. Because you wouldn't have understood. That's when I asked the question that made them stop pretending. Why was it always so easy to choose her? They exchanged a look. Not guilt. Recognition. My mother spoke carefully. Because she's our daughter. I waited. And I'm not? I asked. She didn't answer. I already had the answer. I reached into my bag and placed the final folder on the table. County records, insurance beneficiary files, a medical consent form from years ago that excluded me, adoption, closed, legal, final. I found it when I traced the insurance policies, I said. You forgot those follow different rules. My father's face hardened. We gave you a life. You billed me for it, I said. My mother started crying then, not from guilt, but fear. You were already lucky, she whispered. We didn't think... You didn't think I'd stop, I said. I stood up. The house is mine, I said calmly. So are the investments. I was the primary contributor. I've already reclaimed them. My father stood, angry now. You can't do that. I already did, I said. Legally. That's when I ended it. I'm done funding Marissa's life, I said. And I'm done pretending this was family. Later that night, I called Marissa, not to argue, to inform. The house is gone, I told her. So are the investments. She laughed, nervous. That's fine, the inheritance will... There is no inheritance, I said. Not anymore. Silence. Then her voice cracked. You can't take everything. I didn't, I said. I took what I paid for. That was the moment the system finally collapsed. Not loudly, not all at once, but permanently. They didn't accept it. That was my mistake, thinking they would. 3 days after I reclaimed the house and froze the remaining investments, I got a certified letter at work. Not a call, not a message, a legal notice. My parents were suing me. They claimed I'd abused my position, taken advantage of family arrangements, and unlawfully seized assets that were meant to remain shared. They demanded immediate reversal, compensation, and restoration of agreed support. Agreed. That word did a lot of work. Marissa went public the same day. Not with details, with emotion. She posted about betrayal, about being abandoned, about how money had changed me. She didn't name me, but everyone who knew us didn't need help connecting the dots. Relatives started calling, some angry, some confused, some pretending to be neutral. I didn't respond to any of it. I forwarded the lawsuit to my attorney, and for the first time since this started, I smiled. Because the moment they made it legal, they lost control of the narrative. Discovery was brutal. Every transfer, every message, every emergency, the spreadsheet, the planning conversations, the inheritance drafts, and the adoption records. Their case depended on one idea, that I had voluntarily supported Marissa. The evidence showed something else entirely, a pattern of coercion, misrepresentation, undisclosed dependency, financial manipulation. My parents' attorney pushed for mediation, then backed off, then requested delays, because the story wasn't holding. The judge didn't need to rule on morality, just ownership, and ownership was clear. I had been the primary contributor. The house was traceable to my funds. The investments were seeded and sustained by me. The claim collapsed in weeks. When the ruling came down, it wasn't dramatic. It was final. The lawsuit was dismissed, their countersuit denied, costs assigned. That was when everything unraveled at once. Marissa lost what little credibility she had left. Her public story didn't survive contact with facts. The people who'd rushed to defend her went quiet. Some deleted comments, some blocked her. Her partner was already gone. The money he drained? Irrecoverable. She came to me after the ruling, not angry, terrified. She believed until the very end that inheritance would save her. I told her the truth. "There's nothing left," I said. "There never was. I was it." She broke, not loudly, not theatrically. She slid down the wall in my hallway and cried like someone who'd just realized they'd been living in a borrowed future. My parents collapsed last. First they blamed Marissa, then they blamed me, then they begged. They didn't ask for money anymore, they asked for connection, access, relevance. When that failed, they cried, not because they missed me, because they'd lost authority. The lawsuit was their last weapon. And when it failed, there was nothing left to threaten me with. No leverage, no narrative, no safety net. Just the truth they'd spent decades avoiding. They had built their lives on something they never owned, and now it was gone. After the lawsuit ended, the noise finally stopped. Not immediately, but enough that I could hear myself think again. For the first time in years, there were no emergencies waiting in my inbox. No urgent calls that hijacked my evenings. No quiet pressure pretending to be concerned. My money moved when I decided it should. My time belonged to me. That was the real victory. I didn't celebrate. I didn't make announcements. I just kept going. Only this time, everything I built stayed where I put it. I sold the house, not out of anger, out of closure. I reinvested carefully, the same way I always had. Only now the returns weren't disappearing into someone else's life. Within a few years, my portfolio was stronger than it had ever been, not because I was earning more, but because nothing was draining it in the background. Work changed, too. Without the constant financial bleed, I stopped playing defense. I took a leadership role I'd passed on before, traveled when it made sense, let myself think longer than one quarter ahead. The opportunities that had always seemed badly timed suddenly lined up. Funny how that works. I didn't cut my parents off completely. I kept things distant, civil, boundaried, the version of contact that didn't cost me anything. They aged quickly after that, not physically, emotionally. People who live by control don't adjust well to irrelevance. Conversations grew shorter, then rarer. Eventually, they stopped reaching out altogether. Marissa tried once more. Not for money, for validation. She wanted me to admit that I'd gone too far, that I'd punished her instead of helping her grow. I didn't give her that. Some lessons only land when there's no cushion left. The strangest part was what replaced all of it. Quiet. Not loneliness. Space. I reconnected with people I'd let drift. Old friends who didn't need anything from me. One of them, someone I'd known long before money complicated things, stayed longer than the rest. We took it slow, built something that didn't depend on obligation or rescue. It felt earned. Looking back, I understand something I didn't then. I wasn't punished because I was adopted. I was used because I was dependable. And the moment I stopped being manageable, everything they'd built around me collapsed. I didn't lose a family, I lost a system, and what I built afterward finally belonged to me.